Whereas for Mr. Glen Fubler, teacher, historian, social activist, who will give us a sense of the times and events that surrounded the Belco dispute in 1965.
All right, thank you, Leonard. Leonard Grant, one of my former students, one of my better students too, I want to tell you. Yeah, I'm going to tell you. He and his whole family, I told his brother, he's got Kevin's here, Larry, and his sister, Stacy, right. Before I proceed, I'd like to ask if anybody has immediate family who were either arrested or injured during the fracas. I'm not going to call it a riot. I'm going to call it a fracas that emerged from a tense situation. I'm going to ask them to stand, please. Anybody related, immediate relations. Marion Paul, would you stand, please? Thank you. Well, here. Right, thank you. Vivian Ming's son. All right, Vivian Ming's son. I see Mr. Lynn Millett there. I know his father was arrested. Ralph Millett. He was not imprisoned though. He was able, and Lynn's going to be at, and what I would say, this format that, let me congratulate the team from Belco for agreeing to do this today, because this is essential for a community that is in need of, not just like our community, but the world community really, is in need of a sense of reconciliation. You know, I don't know if you read Nelson Mandela's book, Long Road to Freedom, and he talks about the roots of why he was like he was, because he came out of a very rural environment, and in his community, there's a South African culture called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is about the fact that community is the space in which we thrive. You know, they have the saying that it takes a village, and the village is not just talking about, you know, teaching children how to wash their dishes. It's about life. And they have these regular gatherings in which people share their stories, they share their feelings, they share everything, because they know that life is, we are social beings. We are hominids, Homo sapiens. That sapien means wise. That wisdom is something that's in us all. And we can only get that wisdom. We are social learners, meaning that we all learn from each other. And this is an opportunity right now, and thank you, Belco, for doing this today. Here, this pivotal piece of history that Bermuda is. And I have some, even though I was relatively young, I was just 15 years old, a student just across the way here at Berkeley, and we came out from recess, and we could smell the tear gas in the air. We could actually smell the tear gas in the air. And you got a sense through that day, you know, the rumors were just floating around. And when I got back home at North Village, I ran into my mates, people like Irvin Ingram and Rusty, his brother Rusty Ingram, who's the assistant minister at St. Paul's right now. And a bunch of us went over to Devonshire Rec. We went over to Devonshire Rec, and we came into the space, the field. I mean, it was hundreds of people all across the field. And those people had, obviously, weapons. They had pipes, they had machetes, and the rumors were just floating around the field. These are some teenagers, little boys coming in. And we got a sense that they thought that there was going to be an invasion of Devonshire Rec by the police to arrest more people. However, that didn't happen. Through the course of that, and we were up there for at least an hour and a half, 2 hours, and in the course of that evening, that tension, though, diminished. Why? Because the community was getting together, was rallying together, and there was healing going on in the space. And several people spoke. There were people like Brother Adi and others who were speaking to the crowd over time and talking about the hurts that people felt, the sense of frustration that people felt. Because, you know, they had a president, my favorite president, John F. Kennedy, has a quote in which he says that in circumstances, if people are not allowed to conduct a peaceful revolution, then inevitably you have a violent revolution. So if we look at the journey, the long journey, and I can't talk about it all today, the long journey that we have been through as a human species, we know that we need time to allow for change and fundamental change. I'm using the term revolution because John F. Kennedy used that term. And if we come up this crossroads that we are at today, not just in Bermuda, but more importantly, globally. I mean, you just have to look at the news. But coming together like this is so important so we get our priorities right. Of course we got priorities. We got to keep the lights on. And that's the ethos that's the good ethos of belco, keeping the lights on. And we know that there's a lot of darkness around here. Why? Because we've allowed the lights to fade. And all of, I just around here, I could see people that are trying to keep, and that's their ethos, is to keep our lights on, literally. But we have to keep the lights on within our hearts. And those lights are the most important lights. And that's what that conflict that happened in 1965, a pivotal year then, that was back in 1965. But the year before, in 1964 or 1963 or 1959, if we think about what came up, we had a movement that has its roots way back, a long distance. In 1834, we had emancipation. People who had been enslaved. The status quo was that people were property. But over a period of time of centuries, that was changed. That was changed because of in 1801, our family from Haiti successfully defeated Napoleon's troops. And as a result, they helped to change the world. They helped to change the world. And decades later, what we had to address was the legacy of segregation and anti-democratic facilities and everything. And we brought that about through 1959, quietly, a peaceful revolution by the progressive group, the secret progressive group. They sparked the theater boycott. And out of the theater boycott came some other major change. One of the important things was the CUAS. The progressive group got together with people like Roosevelt Brown, who coordinated that, and they established campaign to get the right to vote. Only 7% of the people of Bermuda could vote up to 1959. And they changed that, but the momentum that they created came from right from the grassroots, from ordinary people, including John Swan at the time, but there was including another personality named Barbara Ball. She, a white person, which was very unusual in Bermuda, she went outside of her box as a member of the human family. She went outside and she supported the right to vote when most other white people wouldn't. And it took some time, and the oligarchs just blocked them all the way, mind you. They blocked them all the way, but they continued. And so Charles Bean encouraged Dr. Ball to come and join the BIU. And the BIU was just rebooting itself from when Dr. Gordon had gotten it going back in the 40s. And thereabout came this new movement, I'm not going to call it a new movement, because it was emerging. All of this, the organizations, the institutions are important, but there's more important things that we as people are together. We have come out as a human family. And so we look for opportunities to work together. And that's what Dr. Ball did when she saw that Addie Simmons and G. Blakely were, were organizing with Robert Johnson to be able to get the union movement again. Then they were able to go to the hospitals in 1964 and had a 4-day strike. That 4-day strike in 1964, Dr. Ball got banned from the hospital. Another campaign came out and got her back in the hospital. And the next year, 1965, they started to establish working rights here at belco. And belco, the same oligarchs who ran the hospital, the same oligarchs that blocked democracy, they blocked them here at belco. And then turned around and they were negotiating, and John Cox said, oh, look, I'm going to go to England for the next 3 weeks. No talks. What do you think they felt after all of that? They lined up here peacefully and had a good relationship initially with the police, but eventually frustration boiled up and we had February 2nd. So that when I went over to Devonshire Rec as a 15-year-old with my mates, we just saw the worst, the darkest days of Bermuda. And what happened though, people did not get drawn into the darkness. Eventually, through their dialogue, just like we're doing today, not dialogue, I'm a monologue, and I'm sorry. As they went through that night, there was one person that really turned things around, the Reverend Vernon R. Bird, who happened to be my minister at St. Paul's AMEA. And he was able to switch or change and transform the atmosphere so that the next 2 days or so, Bermuda came back together. So we went to the darkest days, but then we came back to the light. What I'm going to close in saying that, thank you, belco, for doing this, but on Sunday, which is the actual anniversary, at 9 o'clock in the morning, the Anglican churches are going to try to have their bells ringing right at 9 for 60 seconds, observing the 60th anniversary of this. At 4 o'clock, Kendrick's one of the organizers. Kendrick, put your hand up as a coin person, yes. At 4 to 6 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, we are asking all of you to bring your families to Devonshire Rec. And what we're going to do is recreate the rallying spirit, that concern for each other, regardless of your race, your political party, your football team, your cricket team, regardless of all of that, coming together on Sunday. And we're going to have not only sharing, Andrew's going to be there and a couple of other people who have stories. We're going to have sharing of stories. We're going to have sharing of music. People like Gene Steed's going to be there. We're going to have, who else is going to be there? Joy Barnum. We're going to have Joy Barnum. We're going to have live wires, because that's a belco thing. Live wires is going to be there. Okay? And so, please, what we need to do is let this be a start. Not an end. Let this be a start of a real coming together as a community. That we really have to go back to our roots. Those same roots that Nelson Mandela talked about. Ubuntu. Thank you for your attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Fubler. I just want to say that, when I was a biology student, those were some of my darkest days.